tool in a photographer's toolbox?
I mean, I think understanding light in general is definitely the single greatest tool. Light is our media.
It is our media. We are painters of light.
That's right. So where a painter would have paint and canvas and brushes, and a sculptor would have clay and marble and whatever else they use to make their beautiful sculptures. I don't know, glass.
Sure.
We deal in light. Our camera is designed to capture light. That's all that we are doing when we take a photo, is we're capturing light. We have some sort of material that's reactive to that light, and we're focusing that light in a certain way to create an imprint of an image, right? So understanding light is the most critical thing as a photographer to understand. And there are two different types of light. There is natural light, which we're going to talk about today, and then there's artificial light. And neither is better or worse, neither is harder or easier to understand. They're just different, right? So let's talk about artificial light first.
Yes. So when we work on a wedding day, I would say 95% of the time that we're shooting, we are dealing in natural light. And that's what we're going to focus on today. But the other 5% of the time for us, and probably 90% of the time for a lot of like commercial photographers or editorial photographers, you're dealing with this other type of light, which is artificial light or created light. Right.
So artificial light, like Ashley said, is light that we bring to this. Yeah. Oh, that's artificial light right there. It's light that we bring to our subject, right? That we add into the scene. So a flashlight is artificial light. The little pop-up flash on your DSLR camera, that's artificial light. More advanced flashes where you can bounce it off a ceiling or a wall, that's artificial light.
So fancy.
Even hot lights that are constantly on, like this guy.
It's so bright.
I am artificial light now.
You are so shiny.
Yes. You look really good in that light.
I hate this so much. Please put that away. That is bright.
So this little light that we're using to kind of balance out the natural light that's coming in from the window over here is artificial light.
Yeah, because we created it, we control it, right?
That's right.
Yes.
We can put it where we want, and we can tell it how bright we want it to be, and that is artificial light.
Yes.
So artificial light is really important to understand if you are a commercial photographer, if you work in studios a lot, if you photograph children and families in a studio environment. That's where you really want to understand artificial light. It's a totally different skill set than understanding natural light. You can have both. You don't have to choose.
Yeah, if you're taking money for your photos, you should probably understand both.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah.
But it's a different. It has different challenges and different advantages, right? Artificial light, if we have the time to set artificial light, we can make our subjects look like whatever we want.
Whatever we want. It's amazing.
And we can, we can spend time sculpting light and making sure that there's like a little key light, or a little. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a nice little reflection in our subject's eyes.
I wasn't helping you, by the way.
We can make that light soft, or we can make it hard. We can make it intense, or we can make it kind of meld off into the background so that your subject and your background are kind of exposed similarly. So you have a lot of options when it comes to artificial light. But you have to understand how to use your light sources and set them up and get everything set the way that you envision in your head. Now with natural light, it's different challenges. Natural light would be things like the sun, or the moon, or there are a few different words that people use to describe the same
Has a
type
lot
of light.
Also known as?
Yeah, aka natural light, aka
pseudonyms?
Sure, we'll call it that.
Is that right? Pseudonym?
Let's go with that.
I go by.
Eric Foley, what's up? Colby, it's so good to see you. So glad you guys are joining us. Sorry, that was a little delayed, but you guys are awesome. So natural light. That's
natural light. So natural light. Pseudonyms for natural light would be found light.
Ambient
light.
Yes.
Yeah.
And different people use these terms to mean different things. So some people say natural light is only the sun and the moon, that's all it is. But we would expand that definition a little bit to say like natural light is also that street light that you can't turn off. You can't get around it. It's just there. That's natural found light. Like it's going to influence your photo. It's going to influence your photo no matter what you do if you're shooting.
You can't move it.
So that's kind of the definition that I use when I'm thinking about like artificial versus natural is can I control it?
Yes.
Can I change it?
Yeah.
If I can't change it, I would lump it in with the natural light because
you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit.
Exactly. Yes. Like we tell our 5-year-old.
He doesn't listen. He just pitches the fit. It's great.
So, how do you deal with natural light? What are the challenges that come along with
natural light? So the challenges that come along with natural light, first of all, I think natural light is the best. I love it so much. I am happy to shoot outside any time of the day and would rather be outside personally anytime dealing with natural light than inside dealing.
Like at midnight?
Okay, well, it has to be sarcastic, but probably not. Actually, maybe. You don't know.
You use that moon bounce, babe.
I will. And those stars, have you seen those shots where like it's the person and their headlamp and like the stars are all, I mean, freaking gorgeous. So challenges with natural light is that you have absolutely no control over what you get, truly. Like you do get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. You just have to think critically and figure out how to work around it. So things like clouds, weather, time of day, location, I mean, all of those things affect the type of light that you're going to get, and you can't change any of those things. Well, you can change some of those things. There are certain things you can do to manipulate the natural light and make it a higher quality, and we're going to talk about some of those.
Yes. Yeah, so the first thing that we can control is positioning, or where we are in relation to our subject and where our subject is in relation to our light source, right? So let's say it's midday, and that sun is directly overhead, just a little bit tilted towards the east, we'll say.
Super bright. If
we are shooting to the west, so we're facing our subject, and our subject is kind of facing that light, you're gonna start to see really harsh shadows under their eyes. Everything's gonna get really contrasty. There's gonna be their forehead, like if they have a big forehead like me, it's gonna be like boo. Like
that's really handsome.
Thank you. It's gonna be like a reflector, that's like blinding you. But then there's gonna be like these weird shadows on their face, right? And so that becomes really harsh, hard light. Yeah. Another thing that we can talk about when we talk about light sources, natural light sources, is the size of your light source and the relationship that the size of your light source has to the softness or hardness of light. So a very small light source is going to create very hard, harsh light.
Yes.
That's why we're using a big old ring light that's a big light source right now. Because it's not making really hard shadows on our faces. It's this bigger light source that's kind of falling softly across our face. We've got a big window over here that's doing the same thing on that side of our face.
Right. So the larger the light source, the softer the light, which is why the sun can create really soft light.
Really hard light, because it's a tiny little dot in the sky.
But what about, then explain golden hour.
So what happens with the sun is, I was talking about midday, so you're talking about something different. You've got a very, very tiny light source. You've got a sun. It's very big, obviously, but it's very, very far away. And so in relation to us it's a very small, it's like putting a spotlight on something, right? So in the middle of the day, that's where you're going to get harsh shadows, and it's going to be really hard light. As it reaches the horizon, either in sunset or sunrise, it starts to diffuse, and we're going to talk about that here in a second too, right? But first of all, it's going through our atmosphere in a different way, and the light's refracting in a different way. It's starting to, that intensity of that light is starting to dial down. And now it's starting to refract and reflect and diffuse off of clouds and off of the sky and off of everything else that's happening in the sky, right? So when that happens, we start to get this softer light. We can start to change the direction of our subject in relation to that light source and still have this nice fold of light, this soft light that's kind of washing over our subject.
Wraps around.
Yeah, in different ways. It also, when the sun's lower in the sky during golden hour, it's easier to find shaded areas, right? And you get into the shade, and then your light source actually becomes not that tiny little dot, but the light that's refracting off of clouds in the atmosphere and coming back at our subject. So this very large light source is lighting our subjects, and now it's nice soft light.
Cool. Let's show some examples real fast. You wanna?
Sure. All right, just realized that you couldn't hear anything that we were saying as we looked at that photo. But what we were saying was that is an example of artificial light.
Yes.
And there were a few things that we were pointing out. One was that the light source was behind our subjects, and then it was bouncing off of the cake and kind of hitting our subject's face in a very soft way, because the cake became this large light source, and it was a soft wash of light across their faces. So let's show an example of
hard ambient light.
Hard ambient light, okay. So let's get back to here, and I'll see if I can add our mic on the fly here. Bear with us with our technical difficulties. Perfect.
Yay! Oh, that's
now,
so much better.
You should be able to hear us.
Yes. Let us know. Let us know if you guys can hear us or not. So
right.
This is an example of ambient light that is soft, right? And we'll come back to this in a few minutes. But right now we're going to talk about sort of midday, harsher ambient light and how you can deal with it. Thank you, Scott. Can you hear us now?
Hopefully you can.
Yes. Oh man, it's one of those days, like it's a very Monday, Friday over here. It kind of is a Monday though, because we're working all weekend.
Yeah, a little bit.
It is that season.
Yep. So this is midday sun, and we made a choice here. We talked about this a minute ago, but one of the choices we can make with natural light is how we position our subjects. So you can see on the ground here that their shadows are coming towards us, and this was an intentional choice. When we got to the top of the gondola and Vale, we looked around for an area or for a direction where we could shoot into the sun, because the sun was directly overhead, and we knew that if we shot the other direction, there were going to be very harsh shadows on our subjects' faces. This was a moment where they were seeing each other for the first time, so we wanted it to be kind of intimate and a nice moment for them. But we also wanted it to look kind of nice. And so we chose the position that we wanted to be shooting from, and then let this moment happen and captured it as it did. But this would be a very hard light source, right? This is an example of a hard natural light source, because the sun is a small pinprick, like we were talking about, in the sky. It's coming down, it's hitting the back of our subjects. So actually the light that we're capturing is bounced light. The sun is coming down, it's hitting the ground and the things that are behind us, and it's bouncing back up onto our subjects. And that's the softer light that we can capture, because now we've taken this tiny little light source up in the sky like this, right? This little itty bitty dot of light that's coming down, and we've refracted it and diffused it off of a very large light source, which is the ground down here.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with harsh light, because a lot of times you are in a situation where you're shooting outside and the sun is out and you don't get to control that thing, and that is absolutely fine. There are people who I have heard say, like, I just don't shoot during midday, like, ever. And that, if you can control that, and that's the type of work that you do where you can have that option and choose that, totally fine. That is just not the situation that we're in. We are shooting outside in the elements so often. And so when you're shooting midday, there are two things that you can kind of control or be aware of that will help improve the quality of your light. And the two things that you can do are to change your diffusion and your direction, right? So like Graham was saying, in this situation, we could have found a cloud, we could have found some shade, right? We could have diffused the light through leaves in a tree, or shade that was coming because of a cloud, or diffuse it by positioning our subject in between us and the sun, so that what we're really capturing is that light bouncing off of the ground and diffusing back up onto our subjects and lighting them in a way that doesn't feel as harsh. You can still tell that it's midday for sure, but it's a beautifully lit shot.
Totally. And then you have moments of the day near sunset or sunrise where your light is just soft to begin with. And
that's perfect.
And that's because it's refracting off of the light source is closer to the ground. So in this photo, our light is coming from that direction. It's, off camera coming from that direction. And you can see that you can tell the direction of the light by looking for the highlights on your subject. The back of his suit is highlighted, so you can tell the light's coming from that direction. But you can also tell that the fall off from the back of his head to the front of his face is not that great. It's not the same as if we shot this at midday. It would be a lot more contrasty, a lot harder, and the shadows would be a lot harder if we were shooting at midday. And the reason for that, like we said earlier, is that as that sun gets down closer to the horizon, it is bouncing. Oops, what did I do?
Sorry. There
you go. The intensity of that light is decreasing. It's getting refracted through the atmosphere. It's bouncing more off of the sky and the clouds and the ground and the mountains around, and it becomes this softer light source where we have a little bit more control over what position we can photograph our couple in. So that's So that's an example of kind of that golden hour light that people talk so much about. And that's
super soft, natural light.
Hopefully an explanation of why people talk about golden hour and, why a lot of people prefer to shoot at golden hour, because it just gives you more options without worrying about those harsh shadows or that very intense sunlight.
Totally. Yeah, so the reason that we wanted to talk about this, the reason that you should care about natural light and you should learn all about it, is because light is everything for a photographer, right? If you're at the Taj Mahal, maybe not the Taj Mahal, that's really pretty. Think of like a different pretty location that's like a 7 out of 10, okay? Because that's like a 10 out of 10. But like really, really bad light can make a beautiful location look awful.
You've seen this in your friend's travel photos.
Don't tell us which friend. We don't want to know. But send them our course.
Yeah, that's right. hear the story that they're going to Egypt and they're going to see the pyramids, right? And you're like stoked when they get back. You're like, I want to see your photos, and then they show their photos, and it's like, oh, that's. But you don't say that. You say, that's amazing. It was so cool, and it's cool that they have that photo, but because they didn't know how to shoot in natural light or the tricks that they could use to make that photo look a little bit better, they're just kind of subpar. Right.
Totally. And the opposite is true as well, right? You could be shooting in a back alley with a dumpster, and we have, right? And beautiful light can make an awful location look magical fairyland. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. Where are you? And I'm like, a parking garage.
Yeah. So we live in Colorado now and have for the past
parking garages anymore.
Well, we've lived here for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And the joke that we share with each other is that being a photographer in Colorado is kind of easy. Like, we have the easy button.
Yeah.
It's just easy. It's really nice.
Because we lived
Everything's
in
beautiful.
2 big cities that were not necessarily scenic, let's say, before this. And in both cities, it was like, how do we hide everything?
Exactly. So we learned to harness the power of light in those scenarios, right? Because we couldn't rely on these beautiful locations. We were at a hotel, and the place that we had time to go and take portraits of our couples was the back alley with the trash cans, or the parking garage next door. And oftentimes it was so dang hot that even if we were like a block from a park that was pretty, our couples would be like,
they've already sweat through their shirts.
Yeah. So we figured out how to go into a location that people would be like, why are you taking photos there? And oftentimes they did, right? Like, our clients, or more often like our clients' parents would be like, really? You're going to go to the parking garage?
And we're like, watch this. Because when you understand light, you can make the light do what you want it to do, even when it is natural and found. And you can manipulate things so that it really does some very cool things for a photo.
Totally. So one thing that we teach photographers when we do in-person workshops or in our online courses is look for light.
Yes.
First thing, before you look for location, look for light. Find the good light, and then if there's a great location to go with it, great. If there's not, it's still going to look awesome if you use it correctly.
Even if you're in ugly Telluride.
I know.
You know?
This was really difficult to get a good photo.
You can still make a good picture. Seriously, it's funny because we did, for 7 years, have not the most scenic places to take photos. And they were still cool. It's awesome. But you have to know how to do your job no matter what. And even here, you have to know how to do your job, even if it's like gale force winds and hail in June, because that's what Colorado does, And sometimes you don't get to choose. Sometimes you never get to choose. Totally. The weather's going to do what the weather's going to do.
Totally. One last thing I'll say, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yes.
We talked about diffusion, and let's see. Ashley's asking a question. What do you recommend for a large church with high ceilings? Ooh, yeah.
That's a great question.
Great question, and it really depends on the church. Like, we in Atlanta, there was a church that we shot in all the time. What was the name of that church? The
Christ the King?
Yeah, Christ the King. It was a beautiful Gothic cathedral with teeny tiny little dark stained glass windows and a bright spotlight on the altar. Yeah, it was pretty difficult to shoot in.
They also didn't let you,
and they didn't want you to use flash.
Yeah.
So that's different than, like, I just shot a wedding in Vail, and this chapel that had really nice big windows, and they cranked down the light, that they added. So shooting ambient light in there was nice because you had all of this light bouncing around and creating soft light inside of this cathedral, this church. So that is a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is situational, right? Can I add flash? Can I add light to this? Can I add artificial light to this space? If I can, what's the best way that I can do that to create a kind of a soft feel of light, if that's what you're going for, or a really moody, dark, dramatic feel, if that's what you're going for.
Yeah. And one thing that you can do is you can always call the church beforehand and figure out what their policies are. So there's kind of this stigma in our industry about church ladies, and church guys. I haven't ever really worked with a church guy. They always seem to be women, and
women and their husbands. Sometimes their husbands are there to help.
Yeah, but like some photographer at some point pissed them off, and they like don't love us. However, if you're a nice person, people will be nice to you across the board, no matter what. Church ladies, anybody. You know, I don't know, math teachers. I don't know. I'm making all sorts of. Anyway, moving on. So call them and say, you know, hey, I'm Ashley with the Scobeys. I'm shooting a wedding there on Saturday, and I just wanted to call and let you know, like, we are so stoked to be working there. You guys have such a beautiful space. We're team players, and we wanted to make sure that we were abiding by your rules. So would you mind giving me a rundown of what we're allowed to do? And that way you know what you're walking into. It's not like you have all this awesome gear that you've prepped and you walk in and they're like, no flash for you. And you're like, okay, well, I guess in that situation, I'm going to crank my ISO and figure out which direction to shoot from, where the lights are the brightest or the softest or whatever it is, so that you can make it look really stellar.
Yeah, and that's a part of the answer to your question too, Ashley, is what kind of equipment are you using? You know, if your camera is capable of cranking that ISO without getting really noisy, then a lot of times, even though it feels like a darker space, you can crank that ISO up and your camera will treat it as a lighter space. And it's really about the quality of the light, not the quantity.
Yes.
Right? At a certain point, if you have a camera that's capable of higher ISO performance, then it becomes, okay, what's the contrast of light in this space? Do I have a really bright altar and a really dark aisle? That's like lower quality light. So could I talk to the church lady about, can you guys crank that down a little bit? Those spots, Can you crank those down a little bit?
Because they can. They're on a switch.
A lot of times they can, yeah. So yeah, just a few things to think about, and maybe we'll do like an entire video about artificial light and kind of lighting indoor spaces.
Totally. Also, if you have more questions, feel free to email us, and we're glad to answer them.
Absolutely. And drop them in the comments on this video. We use the comments of our videos to create our next videos. So.
Totally. Oh, Karen, I love you. I miss you.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say one other thing. We talked about diffusion of light and positioning of light. And one thing that one tool that you can use to alter both position and diffusion is a reflector.
Yes.
And this is just a big old disc that has reflective material on it. This one is like a 5-in-1. So inside there is a diffuser. So it's a like semi-transparent white piece of fabric that we can use to create shadows and diffuse light when it's really harsh. And it's really helpful if you're making a portrait of a couple and you're getting really close and you have a dark background to shoot on. You can throw this diffuser up. You can put them in direct sunlight, throw the diffuser up, and then it becomes like a soft light. You turn this teeny tiny little sun into this big old softbox light source.
Yeah, you're bringing your own Frisbee shade.
Exactly. Yeah. You can also use this to kick light back at your subject. So if you put the light source behind them, but you don't have enough fill on their faces, you can throw this in front of them, let the light bounce back from the light source, and fill in some of that shadow on their faces. So that's a super easy tool. They're like $20. But
if you're like us, they're like $200 a year
because we leave them everywhere we go.
Just a cost of business, you know?
Yeah. So that is one way that you can kind of mix artificial and found light. Yeah. You can bring a modifier of some sort that lets you control that natural light source a little bit more than you would be able to otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
That one.
Oh, sorry. All right. We went away for just 1 second. We're back now.
So if you have questions about light or about photography in general, if you have things that you're curious about, we want to know about them. So leave them in the comments. If you're watching this on one of our Facebook channels, we want you to know that we have a YouTube channel, and we would love for you to come and join our community on YouTube and subscribe. We are trying to build our YouTube channel because we found that it's a much better way to host video content than Facebook, which buries everything and makes it really hard to find. So you can go over to our YouTube channel and search, any subject that you're curious about, and hopefully we will have made a video about it. We've made videos about camera settings and ISO and shutter speed and aperture and how cameras work and
how to take photos of those crazy wiggly kids.
Yes. And even some Lightroom tutorials, how to sync your camera times in Lightroom really quickly and efficiently. So if you haven't seen those videos, if any of those things seem interesting, head over to our YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.thescobeys.com. I think we have another link now, but that'll get you there. youtube.thescobeys.com. And hit the little subscribe button and then hit the little bell next to it. And what that'll do is it'll notify you every time we go live. We do these almost every Friday. So we'll be talking about a different subject every week. And it'll also notify you when we upload new videos that are like less live and more produced. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we don't have like, situations like we did in this video where there's maybe 3 minutes of us not talking to you because you couldn't hear us.
Just technical errors all around,
We're learning. We're also really excited. We're hoping to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. And if we do that, we're doing a huge giveaway of some of our favorite photo things.
Yes.
We're about 120 subscribers in, so we're a tenth of the way there.
Yes.
So if you subscribe to our channel and we get to 1,000, you're entered to win a pretty cool photo package and some of our online courses. Mm-hmm. Also, if you're curious about how to use your camera, maybe you have a good dSLR that you haven't really ever figured out how to use, or you just got one as a gift, or you're just getting into photography, check out manualbootcamp.com. Shooting a manual is the #1 way to take your photos from 3s to 9s.
From drab to fab. From zero to hero.
Yes, what she said.
Some more. Keep going.
I'll let you think about that while I continue.
From none to done.
None to done. Shooting a manual allows you to take control of every variable of your photo. So instead of letting your camera decide what your photo is going to look like, you get to decide. You get to say, I have this vision for a photo in my head, and I know exactly how I'm going to make it with my camera. So we've got a free resource we put together for you. It's a manual cheat sheet. You can find that at manualbootcamp.com. And then if you want to spend 7 days, spending about 30 minutes a day learning how to shoot a manual, we can teach you. And we can teach you for $17, which is very little to learn how to make fabulous photos.
Yes, for less than your pumpkin spice obsession.
That's
this
right.
week.
Yeah, just set aside Starbucks for the week,
yes.
and we'll hit your inbox every morning with a different subject about shooting a manual, so that by the end of the week, you have the confidence to walk into a situation and say, I know how to make the photo that I have in my head.
Yeah.
In my camera.
Totally. So, yes.
Yep.
Thank you guys for hanging with us this afternoon, and have an amazing, amazing weekend.
Yes. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.